Warm weather ahead. Climate and linked conditions will affect our lives in more ways than one in coming months. And it's only fair that since lives and livelihoods and thus businesses are going to be affected, we spend some time on this issue. India is set to see hotter weather in coming months after recording the second warmest February in more than a century, raising the risk of water shortages, crop damages, and strain on the electricity and power networks. More parts of the country are likely to see more days of heat waves than usual during the 3 months ending May 31st. Officials at the India Meteorological Department told media last week and quoted by Reuters. An early onset of summer is already raising concerns over the wheat crop, among others, as we discussed earlier on the core report. In 2022, the hottest March in more than 100 years hit production and forced the government to curb exports. And rising temperatures will obviously also boost consumption of coal and essentially lead to a major energy management challenge and situation. I reached out to Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and I began by asking him how we could be better prepared for these rising temperatures, including from a policy perspective.
Last year, at a global scale, we breached the 1.5 degree, but India itself, there were actual recorded heat waves in 2024 were 5 times more than the normal in India. Actual recorded heat wave days. Normally, the warnings are given for, 3-4 days at a stretch. It extended to about 20 days. 2025 February has been the hottest and one of the driest months in India in the last 125 years. In Maharashtra, where you're based, in Mumbai, even in Thane, I think the first heat wave of 2025 occurred in February itself. Mumbai, the maximum temperature crossed over 38 degrees, 38.7 degrees. So this is now occurring, and this is getting worse because of climate. The heat waves in 2022 in India were 30 times more likely because of climate change. So what do we do? First, we have to understand that our predictive modeling has to keep getting better. The Indian Meteorological Department has been investing in this. There is now a newly developed what is called a multi-model ensemble based on which the forecasting is being done. That has to then combine with what we at CW call the hyperlocal assessment of heat and humidity. So this has to be at a neighborhood by neighborhood level. So, for instance, in the same city, if you have a much more built-up area versus a greener area, felt heat will be different. If it is an area where there's a lot more outdoor activities, such as construction, the impact on public health will be different from where it might be central business district, where many workers will be indoors in office buildings. So the same heat has different implications. So this neighborhood by neighborhood hyperlocal mapping of the heat stress helps to then design the heat cum humidity action plans. In addition to that, what we have to understand is that urban areas in India are already warming faster than the rest of the country, precisely because of not just the climate-induced heat, but what is called the urban heat island effect. So we have to seriously start thinking about city design, including green cover, including water bodies, etc., that help to absorb the heat better. Once you've got these basic benchmarks and baselines established, then we have to save lives, save livelihoods, and look at the broader ambient ecosystem. So for saving lives, we need to invest in the early warning based on that hyperlocal mapping as well as the predictive analytics. But especially for the poor and the vulnerable, those working outdoors, we need to build cooling shelters in that very kind of evidence-based way, which are the parts of the city, etc., that this is needed. On top of that, we have to also think about the cooling solutions that we are providing in low-cost housing. Not everybody is going to be able to afford an air conditioner. So how do we ensure that the financial instruments that are there to lower the upfront cost of, say, higher efficiency, ceiling fans, etc., or passive cooling solutions, all this is designed into the low-cost housing that is being developed. And finally, we will have to also think of micro insurance schemes to support workers who are going to lose income when it becomes too hot to work outdoors for at least a certain number of hours in the day, if not for the entire day as a whole. So, heat is not just, again, an environmental impact of climate change. It then has economic impact in terms of the hours your workers can work. And it has equity impacts in terms of those who are living in more exposed areas, undertaking more exposed work, or do not have the resources to support themselves when they lose income as a result.
Dr. Ghosh also recently authored a piece in the Hindustan Times where he put out an action plan for combating air pollution in New Delhi, the capital. Of course, air pollution is not such a blazing issue right now, and maybe blazing is the right word because in summer times, air quality improves, and usually and perhaps often that causes people to slack and not much is done, leading to a situation where it's winter once again and pollution starts rising. Now, there is a fair emphasis in that report on reducing vehicular traffic and also creating disincentives for people to own cars, like reducing the amount of parking spaces. Now, Delhi's problems and battles with air pollution are well documented. My question to Dr. Ghosh as we step into this relative period of calm was what should other cities in India do in order to prepare themselves for this fight against air pollution, including cities like Mumbai, which saw pollution levels matching and even crossing Delhi on some days last year, and that was perhaps for the first time ever.
I think the first thing we have to understand is that air pollution is a sort of multi-hydra, or rather hydra-headed problem with multiple sources. The sources vary from city to city, but the basic composition of the sources is pretty much the same. There's transport emissions, there's dust, construction dust, but also road dust, there's industrial pollution, there's a burning of municipal solid waste, there's burning of agricultural waste, and then there is indoor pollution from unclean fuels used for cooking. The first lesson that any city has to learn is to do these updated source apportionment studies. Basically, you do an inventory of the different pollution loads and then you try and identify what are the sources. So, if in Delhi the bulk of the pollution is coming from transport, in Mumbai it could be from construction dust, for instance. So, there are about 130 odd cities under the National Clean Air Program, what are called the non-attainment cities. And each one has to do that detailed source apportionment. That's one thing. Second is that we have to make sure that we have a very extensive network of air quality sensors. Delhi has a lot more compared to other cities in India. But even then, we need to understand that there has to be a balance between large regulatory grade monitors and a network of low cost monitors which can provide real time information. The third thing you need for this backbone is a decision support system, which uses the air quality information that is coming in and then links it to the sources and helps the authorities to make those decisions in a fairly real time basis. And the fourth part of the backbone has to be, of course, the enforcement authorities. And the enforcement authorities are a combination of a state pollution control board or a pollution control committee, and of course, other law enforcement officials. So when you put this backbone together, then you have to see, what actually you have to do. And I think one important element here, and I've been writing about this consistently, is that we need a mission mode on dealing with air pollution. The bulk of the world cities currently suffering from very poor quality air are in India. This is not something just to be kind of instinctively opposed to or something that we think is a shame on India or something like that. We have to understand that this is impacting not just our public health, but also impacting labor productivity. It is impacting foreign investment and it is impacting GDP growth. So if we are interested in our economic development, we should be interested in cleaner air rather than thinking of cleaner air as an obstacle to economic development. Across the world, we have seen that as cities and countries have cleaned up their air, investments, talent acquisition, growth, productivity has all increased rather than decreased. So we need a mission mode. With that mission mode, you need targets and you need short-term targets and medium-term targets. So we can hold each other to account for getting to those targets. In the same way we are dealing with energy transition, the same way we're dealing with, say, industrial decarbonization, or any other mission you take on, or building roads or whatever it is. Once you get into a mission mode, you have a long-term target supported by the short and medium-term targets. You know what to get to. You know the people who are responsible, and you get on with it.
So if you were to pick one, for example, you've talked about private vehicles as one category to address in Delhi, and addressing it not just by bringing down the number, but also focusing on issues like parking, which becomes a disincentive to people to buy cars to start with. Is that something that you feel more feasible compared to the others? I mean, in terms of friction and so on?
No, see, there will always be friction at the outset for any kind of proposed change. But at the same time, we have to see the intervention here proposed here is not just for air quality. It actually improves your travel time while reducing congestion. It improves the fluidity in a city, the dynamism in the city. So parking has to be part of a solution that we have proposed as along with the investment in public transport, the number of buses that need to be there, in addition, of course, to the metro railway, etc. And as well as the cleaning up of the actual fuel. So shifting away, we are recommending a sales mandate for e-vehicles. Parking, decongestion, congestion pricing, public transport, and the shift in the fuel type are part of the overall transport plan that we are suggesting. Right? Just one or the other, if you do it, the friction arises when you say there is only one solution and the others don't have to happen. And then the consumer, the citizen feels, well, you've just increased my parking rates, but you've not reduced congestion or you've not provided me with a public transport alternative, etc. It's when all of this comes together. It's like this, you go into a surgery, you can't say, well, I'm going to operate, but I'm not going to sew up your wound or I'm not going to give you a post-op medication. Obviously, no one's going to want to go into that surgery.
Or if you don't have an anesthetist in the room?
Right now, honestly, we are living without anesthesia, and that is why this is so painful.
Arunabha, thank you so much for joining me.
Sure. Thank you, Govind.